Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this special lecture. It's a real privilege and delight and honor for me to be able to introduce my former student to all of you. Minister Furukawa studied here 18 years ago and decided while he was here that he was going to leave the Ministry of Finance and run for the Diet. And I remember cautioning him that was a very risky thing to do. And he said, well, I'm going to do it. And he's really done it. He's had a spectacular career in the Japanese Diet over, 17 years now. And as you know, he is now the Minister of State for Economic and Fiscal Policy. Actually, when you look at his resume here, he is the Minister of State for lots of things at the moment. He's the Minister for National Policy. He's the Minister for Science and Technology Policy. He's the Minister for the total reform of the Social Security and tax system and space policy. So Minister Furukawa is a very busy man indeed, and he's in a very key, critical position in this new government of Prime Minister Noda. And he arrived in Washington the night before last and was in Washington yesterday and this morning and flew up from Washington, especially to come back to his alma mater here at Columbia to talk to all of us about the Japanese economy and the policies of this government. So without further ado, I want to welcome to the podium Minister Furukawa.
Thank you very much. A very kind introduction. Professor Gerald, fellow students of Columbia University, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to all of you for giving me the opportunity to express my thoughts and my resolve for the future today. I would also like to express my gratitude to Professor Curtis and his colleagues, in particular for arranging this opportunity. I would first like to talk about how I have come to pursue a political career, and then offer my comments on the current state of the global economy and the form that capitalism should take from historical and ethical viewpoint. Lastly, I will talk about the role that Japan should play in dealing with global challenges. It is my great honor and pleasure to make my first speech abroad as a cabinet minister at Columbia University. It means a lot to me because my career as a politician is rooted in my experience as a Columbia University student. I joined the Ministry of Finance in 1988 and obtained an opportunity to study in the United States in 1993. I must confess that I had not fully understood what the world outside Japan was like until I actually experienced life abroad. Of course, I had formed my own idea of what other countries and the international community would be like. At Columbia University, I realized that I was merely looking at the outside world through the filter of my upbringing in Japan. What surprised me most during my days at Columbia University was the fact that people from all around the world were living together in the same community with a diverse range of coexisting values. This was quite different from how things were in Japan, where common values are widely shared and where people who uphold different values could be ostracized. Here at Columbia University, I live together with people with different values and different cultural backgrounds in an environment totally different from Japan. And that led me to take a fresh look at myself and my country from a totally new perspective, as someone looking at Japan from the outside. This was around the time of the Clinton administration inauguration, and the US was struggling with expectations of a change, something new. On the other hand, Japan was busy mopping up the aftermath of the bursting of economic bubble, and Japanese politicians and bureaucrats could not take effective measures to get the country on a growth path. Eventually, that led to Japan's lost 2 decades, as you know. During my 1-year stay at Columbia University, I reflected on why Japan couldn't change. Here are the thoughts that went through my mind. First, on the relationship between politicians and bureaucrats. As an analogy, think of Japan as a train. Politicians design and build the railroads, and bureaucrats drive the train along those rails. The country recovers from the ashes of World War II and achieved economic development and prosperity because bureaucrats continue to drive the Japanese train successfully from the end of the war through the period of breakneck economic growth until the mid-1970s. However, since the end of the Cold War, the world underwent drastic changes politically, economically, and socially as the wave of economic globalization spread. Those changes necessitated bold and timely policy changes. In other words, new railroads. However, politicians had not yet built new railways. Bureaucrats were driving old railroads, risking derailment or a crash. That was the conclusion that I reached after spending 1 year here. I decided to build new railways. Thus, I quit my job as a bureaucrat and embarked on a political career to get Japan out of the crisis. In that sense, my roots as a politician can be traced to my experience as a Columbia University student. Immediately before returning to Japan after finishing my studies here, I told Bob Immerman, senior research scholar who took care of me and sadly passed away recently, about my decision to quit my job at the Ministry of Finance and pursue a political career. By way of encouraging, he assured me that I should consider myself to be running on the ticket of Columbia University when I ran for election, irrespective of which party I ran for. No words can explain how much this kind encouragement cheered me up at that time and continued to echo in my mind at a time when I was preparing to launch my political career as a young, aspiring candidate. Columbia provided a turning point in my life and laid the foundation of my present career, and I'm deeply grateful. Now, I would like to talk about a very important issue, the current economy. It is a little more than 3 years since Lehman shock shook the global economy. The global economy has yet to recover, and currently, governments are failing to coordinate their response to the European debt crisis. It is said that the wise man learns from history. The fool learns only from experience. In the Great Depression of 8 decades ago, a stock market crash triggered bank failures on a massive scale, and recession spread worldwide. In response to that crisis, government abandoned the gold standard and engaged in a currency devaluation war. They built trade barriers and took the path toward economic blocks. Eventually, the tragic consequences led to World War II. The problem at the time was this: no country was willing to exercise global leadership, nor was there adequate framework for international cooperation. It should be noted in the current crisis that governments have confirmed at international meetings like G7 and G20 their resolve to implement fiscal measures in a coordinated manner in order to support the global economy. We have seen some protectionist moves, but overall, it is highly commendable that governments have generally formulated their policy responses based on the lessons of the Great Depression. They have taken measures to ensure that public demand makes up for a lack of private demand and refrains from trying to boost their own economies at the expense of other countries. In light of that, it is important that Germany and France exercise their leadership in dealing with the European debt crisis, and that all countries demonstrate to the people and the market their resolve to work together to support the euro. It is also important that the indebted countries convince the people of the need for austerity and conduct their economic management with discipline. Likewise, Japan and the United States also needs to maintain the market's confidence by achieving economic growth and fiscal consolidation at the same time through sound macroeconomic management. By doing so, both countries will be able to act as anchors of the global economy and contribute to economic stability. I believe that a time of crisis like this provides an opportunity and a need to have fundamental debate. One of them should be about the evolution of capitalism and the need for ethics to underpin capitalism. Subprime loans, which were the origin of the crisis, were promoted as if they were a magic wand that enabled low-income families to attain their dream of home ownership. In reality, however, predatory lending practice prevailed, causing people with no chance of making repayments to be saddled with debt. It cannot be regarded as a sound commercial activity. At the World Economic Forum's Davos conference 4 years ago, Bill Gates delivered a speech on creative capitalism. This concept seeks to take advantage of the market mechanism of capitalism in order to resolve problems arising from capitalism, such as widening inequality and the spread of poverty. Bill Gates, together with U2 vocalist Bono, launched the Red Campaign, under which profits from the sales of a range of red-colored products such as iPods, are donated for the fight against AIDS in Africa. The more successful this campaign is, the more funds that are raised to help to resolve poverty-related problems in Africa. This is a win-win project that brings benefits in terms of both commercial business and resolution of global challenges. This approach has something common with a traditional Japanese concept called Sampo Yoshi, which literally means all three parties doing well. This concept used to be prevalent among merchants in the Omi region, who are famous for their business acumen. If merchants are to develop their businesses, they need not only to pursue their own interests, but also to give consideration to benefits for their trading partners and the communities within which they do business. Business must be conducted in such ways that all three parties, namely sellers, buyers, and communities, enjoy prosperity. That is the concept of Sampo Yoshi. In the Meiji period, A.H. Shibusawa, known as father of Japanese capitalism, having created hundreds of companies, advocates the practice of holding an abacus in the right hand and a Confucian text in the left hand. In other words, he stressed the importance of aiming to achieve long-term prosperity for companies, customers, and society by pursuing both economic interests, as represented by the abacus, and ethical integrity, as represented by the Confucian text. In the Western world, Max Weber shed light on the relationship between capitalism and ethics in his classic work, The Protestant Ethic and the Spirit of Capitalism. He argued that capitalism is rooted not in the quest for profit, but in the Protestant ethic. As I explained, if the global economy is to regain order and maintain sustainable, stable growth, it is important that politicians and business managers take action that are in line with society's broader happiness. Japan seeks to be an active contributor to this global debate. We need a world that balances economic, social, and environmental well-being. As one of the largest economies in the world, with strong social indicators such as long life expectancy, low unemployment, and low crime rate, and leading-edge energy efficiency, we believe that Japan has a lot to offer. Lastly, I would like to talk about the role that Japan should play in the global economy. The Japanese economy has remained stagnant for a long time since the collapse of its bubble. I have driven the government effort to formulate new growth strategy intended to lift Japan out of its economic stagnation. In essence, the strategy calls for Japan to address and solve global issues as a frontrunner and to become a new model of growth for the world. What will be the global obstacles to growth? First, energy and environmental problems will pose an obstacle to growth. These problems have continued to be major challenges for Japan, which depends on foreign sources for most of its energy needs. Adding to those challenges, the Fukushima nuclear accident has made it necessary for Japan to fundamentally review its energy policy. The role that Japan is expected to play is to resolve those problems and set forth a new model of growth. Japan aims to continue to lead the world in energy efficiency through technical innovation and regulatory reforms. Energy efficient growth will be the model of all future global growth, and Japan will lead the innovation. Another structural problem faced around the world, mainly in the developed world, is a declining birth rate coupled with the aging of society. Japan has the most rapidly aging society, with a proportion of elderly people as high as 23%. As the proportion of elderly people is set to increase in the future, it is essential to design and build new pension and healthcare systems in order to maintain their vigor. The aging of society surely has negative aspects. However, the aging of society is a reflection of high lifetime expectancy that humanity has sought throughout history. Japan will aim to create a modern social system that enables elderly people to enjoy healthy lives and play a more active role in society. One can envision an expansion of medical and nursing care market. It will also affect all types of consumer goods that can create products for the elderly. Aging market is a source of innovation, new industries, and jobs. 2 years has passed since the DPJ came into power. In those 2 years, our government launched the new growth strategy. The newly inaugurated Noda administration is committed implementing this strategy. Japan has surprised the world with the quick progress it has made in restoring the supply chains that were damaged by the earthquake and tsunami in March. We seek to surprise the world again by creating cutting-edge models for resolving energy and environmental problems, including nuclear power station safety measures, and also for dealing with the aging of society. This is my job as a minister and a politician. Since March 11 this year, when the Great East Japan earthquake occurred, the government of Japan has devoted utmost efforts to the recovery and reconstruction of those damaged areas. In so doing, we received tremendous support from the US, our most important ally. On behalf of the people of Japan, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to the people of the US. I recall that New York itself suffered a huge damage on September 11, 10 years ago, but has since been magnificently recovered from such tragedy. Japan has also been devastatingly hit by large disasters many times in its history. However, Japan has always recovered. It is a resilient society. Colombia gave me the impetus to become a politician. As a minister, I returned to Colombia to solemnly swear that I will do my utmost to address challenges in Japan and the world. We need a better world. We need leadership. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister Furukawa. I thought that was actually quite an extraordinary, extraordinary speech. You know, he represents the new generation of political leadership in Japan that's forward-looking and far-sighted, and speaks frankly and honestly about the issues, and talking about broad issues of relationship between ethics and economic policy, and then what he had to say about what Japan has to contribute to the world and how it can build on its strengths to have a new era, a new prosperous era, not only for its own country, but one that will contribute to global prosperity. I thought that was really very impressive. Now, he has agreed to take questions. We don't have a great deal of time because he has to leave fairly soon for another meeting, but we do have some time for questions. So I'm going to go sit down at the table, but I think you can stay right there. I'll field the questions, and just raise your hands, and we'll go from there. Maybe I'll stand up here. It's easy for me to see. Professor Weinstein, David Weinstein. Do we have a mic? Let's go. And just identify yourself, please. And you know, I don't mind if the answers are long, but the questions should be short.
Thank you very much for a wonderful talk. One of the things that's remarkable about Japan is it went through a terrible crisis over the last 20 years involving bank failures, a housing bubble, a stock market bubble, et cetera. And as we look back on that, it looks like what happened in Japan was the run-up to the main event. That is, many Americans were critical of Japan and how they handled the crisis, and now we find ourselves in a very similar type of crisis, and Europe is also facing another debt crisis. What do you think are the big lessons from Japan over the last 20 years that you would recommend other countries to follow in terms of how they handle this crisis?
Well, since my position is official position, so I have to be very careful to use a very political correct words. So sometimes I ask her to interpret. But as for your question, I will answer in English. I think that we are now facing the completely new society. But our way of thinking still on the line of which we have experienced in the past. So in the case of Japan, we had the thought that someday the economies will going up again, and the land price will going up again. So the yesterday comes again. That kind of mindset were there. So that's why we postponed the very painful measure to solve the problems. So I think that we all have to realize that we are now living a completely different world, which we have experienced for these half century or so. Yeah, that's my recognition.
I'll go to this side of the room. Yes, Joe?
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. I'm also studying with Professor Curtis in his seminar, so I'm one of your kohai. I'm studying in the Weatherhead East Asian Institute right now, and now it's new students, 15. Among them, 14 are focusing in China, and 1 is focusing in Korea, and nobody is focusing in Japan, which was very shocking to me. So my question is, may I ask your strategy to show up Japan in the United States or more globally in the world?
Very one good answer is, you as a person to present the, it's not a matter of the number. Yeah. If there is anyone who can present Japan, you're the person. You can present how Japan will be and what kind of culture we have. We have a lot of things we can show other countries' people. Don't be afraid of Of course, I think that there are some many Koreans or Chinese friends, but don't be afraid of others. As a Japanese, to be proud of, at that time, when I was in the Columbia University, there was many Japanese. So, for me, that kind of environment was not good because in terms of studying English, because so many Japanese were there, so I spoke to them in Japanese. So that's why my English is still very terrible. So I think that number is not a problem. Yeah. You have strong, you are the person to express, to present Japan. Yeah.
Yo Yi, I'm glad to see all my seminar students are here today.
Hello, dear Minister. I'm from China, and I'd like to raise a question about the Japanese-China relations. We are all looking forward to a better future in bilateral relations, but there may be some crises, like the last year. So how does Japan will address the political crisis and maintain the economic ties with China during the crisis? Thanks.
Well, thank you very much. I think that the relationship with China is very important for Japan because we are neighboring countries, and we cannot separate actually. So I think that very important things to know each other. So in that sense, it's good thing that your Chinese and Japanese are sitting both neighbor close, and so those kind of transaction or the relationship is very important. And I hope that it seems to me these days many Chinese, young Chinese prefer to go to English-speaking countries. And unfortunately, those who want to come to Japan is now, I heard that it's not so popular. So I hope that more and more talented Chinese young people like you come to Japan and to have experience. And if we share the same experience, I think that we can know more each other. So the more close communication between two countries is, I think, the key to strengthen or the good relationship with those two countries.
Yes, that man there. Yeah, please.
First of all, thank you for your speech today. In relation to deregulation in Japan, it's been a long time coming. Your new Kohai will have to explain to his colleagues, his classmates here, what to expect in terms of deregulation, for example, of the utility market, of the financial system. What would you suggest he explain to people who ask about what to expect in the next few years?
This is a very delicate issue, so I speak in Japanese. 規制改革については、この新政権になってから行政刷新会議というものを作って、そのもとに規制改革を専門に扱うそういう分科会を作って、これまでも取り組んできています。
With regards to the reform of the deregulation or regulation matter, under the new administration, we put together a administrative renewal conference or so, and under which there is a working group made up of the specialists to look at the regulatory issues.
特にこの規制改革というのは、予算を使わないで、経済を活性化できる、そういった意味でも経済刺激の的な効果も多い部分であるというふうに考えて、我々は力を入れている部分です。
In particular, this reform of regulatory framework is that without really spending money, we are trying to activate the economy or to stimulate, there would be some effect of economic stimulus. So we are particularly focused on this.
特に今回の震災からの復興の過程においては、相当なお金がかかることが考えられています。そのために今政府与党の間でも、復興のための復興債という特別な国債を発行して、その部分の償還のためには、所得税や法人税の今の税率に付加税のような形で税率をかけて、負担をお願いをすると、そういうことも考えています。
Especially when we consider the effort and work that would be necessary for us to recover from that big earthquake, it's going to cost us lots of money. And therefore, the government and the major party is looking at the possibility of issuing so-called recovery bond, the government bond. And when you think about redemption or maturing that bond, we really have to consider raising either income tax or corporate tax as sort of an additional, increase. And those are the things that's been considered.
大変経済状況が厳しい中で、このような増税をお願いするのは非常につらいことではあるんですけれども、しかし一方でヨーロッパをはじめとしてソブリン問題が大変大きな問題になっている中で、日本は先進国の中でも飛び抜けて財政赤字を抱えていますので、やはり財政規律を守るというそうした姿勢だけはきちんと維持をしていかなければなりません。だからこそ、そうした復興にかかるための特別な復興債の発行に関しては、その分のきちんと特別な手当をするということにしたわけであります。
Of course, we are more than aware that this is a painful measure to ask people to pay more tax at the time of economic difficulty. However, when we look at the issues developing in Europe, the sovereign debt, Japan, among the developed countries, we do have an exceptionally large amount of fiscal deficit. Therefore, we really have to impose upon ourselves this sort of a discipline, and that's very much needed. And therefore, when we are to issue this kind of a special bond for Japan to recover, we also have to consider how to take, to pay for it.
しかしだからこそ、少しでもそうした国民負担を減らすためのあらゆる努力はしていかなきゃいけないということで、今回の復興の過程の中では、その復興地域については特別に規制をですね、従来のところであればあった規制を解除するとか緩和すると、そういうことをですね、特に力を入れてやっていくつもりでいます。
Having said that, we also have to make efforts at the same time how we could reduce the burden on the part of Japanese people, and particularly the areas that were hit hard by those natural disasters. We are to either loosen certain regulations or to completely take away some regulations, and those are the things that we are particularly working very hard on right now.
特に今までの規制をですね、大きく変える手段として、復興特区という特区を作ることを考えています。その特区の中では、例えば5年間新規に立地した企業に対しては法人税を実質的に免税にすると、そういう今までに日本ではやったことのなかった他の国のですね特区と比べても引けの取らないそういうですね思い切った 措置も取ることを考えています。
And when we are to look at very drastic deregulatory measures, we are considering putting together a special zone for recovery. For example, for the coming 5 years, if a new company is to be established within such a special zone, the corporate tax could be forgiven. I mean, this is a very drastic measure that we haven't done in Japan in the past, but we are willing to even look at the possibility of implementing such a measures. And I think this is really, a very good comparison to other economic zones in the world.
こうした特区などで今までの規制を大きく緩和するとか、そういうことをですね、実現することによって、そこで成功すればそれを日本全体にも広げていく、今回の復興からの回復の過程を新しい日本の経済構造を作る、そして規制改革も大きく進める、そういうチャンスにしていきたいというふうに考えています。
And if this special zone becomes very successful, such a rather large measure of deregulation really works out well, then we would like to consider expanding that to the rest of the country. In other words, this process of recovery from the natural disaster could prevent us with a great opportunity to restructure the country of Japan and see how better off we could be.
Let me go to this side of the room again. Yes. Yeah, it's you. Just identify yourself, please.
Thank you. My name is Shai. My question is somewhat building on the question of my Chinese colleague. If you look at other successful countries around the world, you see that the society is very multicultural and multinational. It's especially prevalent in the US, where, in the past 10 years, 80% of the new millionaires are immigrants. Do you think that part of turning Japan more successful and more competitive in the global arena, which will, of course, help it to be a stronger player in the global context, encompasses opening the society up to immigrants and international investors, and what measures are taken to implement?
日本はですね、移民というのを基本的に受け入れていない国であるということは事実です。
It's true that Japan is not basically accepting immigrants.
しかし多くの外国の人たちがですね、日本にまた住んでいるというのもまた事実です。
At the same time, there are many foreigners who do live in Japan.
そして同時に多くの人に日本に来てもらおうと、観光なんかもそうですけれども、そういう努力をしているのも事実です。
And also, we are making efforts to try to invite many people to come to Japan, and one such example is to promoting the tourism.
私は、外のですね、私自身がこのコロンビアというところに生活した、そのことがきっかけで、自分の人生を変えられたのと同じようにですね、さまざまな違うカルチャーというか違う国の人と接するということは、非常に刺激を受けることになっていいことだと思っています。
When I consider what happened in my life, i.e. that I lived and studied here at Columbia University, and that really triggered to change my course of life. So I believe it is really important that one lives next to people with different cultural background or people from different countries.
したがってこれからもですね、日本は世界の国々とより深く関わっていくようなそういう努力はしていかなければいけないと思っています。
So going forward, I think Japan has to make efforts or continue to make efforts to deepen our relationship or involvement with the people from the other country of the world.
特に最近は逆に日本人で外に行く人が減っている、非常に内向きになっていると言われてますので、もっともっと日本人が外に出ていくですね、でいろんな経験をしてもらいたいというふうに思っています。
And lately, Japanese people are more inward-looking. There are fewer Japanese willing to go outside, and I hope that more people, Japanese, are willing to go outside and gain richer experiences.
Yes, the lady over there.
Thank you, Minister Furukawa. Thank you for a very interesting speech. My name is Pamela Fuller, and I'm a corporate and international tax attorney. And unlike most of the people in this room, I didn't go to Columbia. Rather, I went to the school down the street, NYU, for my advanced degrees. I hope you don't hold that against me. I was very impressed with the last few years with the Diet's passage of liberalizing company law and tax law reforms. It's been revolutionary, I think most people would agree. The 2005 company law, was it 2007 or 8 financial instruments and exchange law, JSOX, which really wasn't liberalizing, but I think it made the capital markets more reliable. And then, of course, the triangular merger provision, which was delayed by 3 years. My question is, there's been all these liberalizing laws on the books, thanks to the Diet and the forward-thinking young bureaucrats. But how do you change the exclusive mindset of these Japanese boards, as evinced by what happened in the Steel Partners case, the cross-shareholding that seems to increase every time there is a little bit of, I don't know, fear of foreign investors or foreign invaders. And I'm just wondering, I like hearing about all these liberalizing regulations that the Diet is interested in passing, but I'm just wondering, do you think that the Japanese mindset of those corporate boards should be liberalized too, perhaps letting in more foreign investors and women?
大変難しい問題だと思いますけれども、今回、例えば、特区で、ですね、5年間法人税を無税にする、これは新規に立地した企業に対して提供するつもりでいます。でこれは外からですね、来るアメリカ企業も含めですね、人たちにも適用されますので、そこはやはりですね、まだまだ日本での投資とかそういうものが少ない部分、そうしたところがなかなか日本のカルチャーとですね、うまく合わない部分があるんじゃないかと思いますから、もっともっとやっぱり外からの投資や、あるいはその外国の企業なんかの活動というものが日本の中で広がっていくということが大事じゃないかというふうに思っています。
I think it's a very difficult issue. Like this special economic zone that I was referring to earlier, for the coming 5 years, if a company is to be established newly, then their corporate tax could be forgiven. And this is whether it's a Japanese company or a foreign company. And we are welcoming those foreign entities and come and to start their business. And I think still to this day, foreign investment into Japan may not be sufficient, or therefore the Japan as a whole is not really exposed enough to outside elements. And therefore, I think we have to encourage more investment into Japan by foreign entities, and also for foreign companies to come into Japan and operate in our country.
そして女性の活用についてはもっともっと私も日本のですね、大変優秀な女性たくさんいるわけですから、活用すべきだと思いますし、ともすると日本の女性はなかなか日本の中で活躍する場が見つからなくて、アメリカなどで来て海外で活躍していると、そういう人たちも多いわけでですね、こうした人たちが日本の中でも活躍できるような、そういう環境は作っていかなければいけないというふうに思っています。
Regarding the women's issue, yes, it is true that there are many talented Japanese women, but they feel that they cannot really do what they like to do, or they can be, evaluated fairly within Japan. So they tend to go outside, and they are doing quite well in many foreign countries. But I think we really have to establish an environment so that those women feel, like coming back to Japan, or they could really do well in our country as well.
I think we only have time for maybe one or two questions more, and there are lots of hands still up, but let me go to the student over here.
Thank you, Mr. Furukawa, for your excellent speech. My name is Shinsuke Hirose, And I was very intrigued by how you mentioned how Japan remains committed to developing a new energy policy and for new regulations on the nuclear industry, which, as the recent disaster in Fukushima has demonstrated, that particular efforts must be taken in that regard. The Noda government announced its commitment towards safe nuclear energy, and I was wondering what steps the government is considering taking regarding how the regulatory structure of the nuclear industry should be changed, and whether it's time to perhaps change the structure of how these nuclear corporations, such as Tokyo Electric, and their relationship with government, which has been highly criticized in the aftermath of the Fukushima disaster.
福島の原発を受けての、日本のエネルギー政策のゼロベースでの見直し、そして電力の供給体制の見直し、これはですね、まさに日本の経済構造そのものの見直しにもつながるものであって、我々としてはですね、しっかりとこれに取り組んでいきたいというふうに考えています。
This accident at the Fukushima nuclear power plant really triggered us to review Japan's energy policies and also how we should look at our system of providing electric power to Japanese people. But this also relates to the fundamental issue of how the Japanese economy should be structured. Therefore, as far as the new administration goes, we really would like to tackle this issue very seriously.
特に原子力政策については、その政府の中の監視体制も含めですね、新たに原子力安全庁というのを来年の4月に発足させるという形で、組織の体制も含めて、根本的に見直す予定でいます。
With regards to the nuclear power policies within the government, this is really dealt with currently very seriously, and a new nuclear safety agency will be formulated next year. So we are trying to really look at this issue very fundamentally and very seriously.
大事なことは、やはり経済活動に不可欠な電力をきちんと安定的に、そしてできるだけ低いコストでやっぱり供給できる体制を作っていく。でしかもその電力の供給がですね、まさに国民の皆さんに安心してもらえるあり方で発電をしていくと。やっぱりそういうですね、いくつかの国民から求められている要素をですね、きちんとそれを実現をする形のそういう解を見つけていくために全力を尽くしていきたいというふうに思っています。
What's important is that how we could provide a very important element of economic activity, i.e. the electric power, in a steady manner, safely, at a reasonable cost. And we have to be able to provide the power to the Japanese people in such a way that the Japanese public feel safe and feel secure about it. And we really have to pay attention to the elements that people are asking about with regards to this power provision, and then try to find the solutions or answers how we could do that working together going forward.
Ladies and gentlemen, we've first heard a really very interesting and I think very encouraging speech from Minister Furukawa, and then we've had almost 40 minutes of very good questions and covering a wide range of topics, and we've seen here the new leadership of Japan, someone who is in command of the facts, who has philosophy, who has strong views, and who is honest and frank in sharing them with his audience, in this case, the audience at Columbia University. So as a long-term observer of Japan, as Minister Furukawa's former professor, and as someone concerned about the future of our globe and of U.S.-Japan relations, I can't tell you how personally pleased I am to have been able to welcome him back to Columbia today. We have a little present.
Big present.
omiyage from Columbia University.
Thank you.
For you to bring back to Japan, and I hope you'll all join me in thanking Minister Furukawa for a very wonderful afternoon here at Columbia University.